Hello, Dons fans. Ian here from Don the Stat, and welcome to the Don the Stat Best and Fairest, the Jack Kirby Medal. We've been collecting votes for this across the entire of the season, and we're here to present the results. It's the inaugural year of the Kirby Medal, and we think it'll grow into something that'll compete with the Crichton. In fact, I won't be surprised if we outrate the Crichton this year. With me is my Don the Stat co-host Jono. Jono, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you, mate. Yeah, let's hopefully we can make this a little bit more interesting than the Brownlow medal and don't put people to sleep. But yeah, mate, I'm going well. It's been a little while since we've been on the airwaves together. So yeah, good to be in your company again and looking forward to going through the votes.
Yeah, let's do it. So, in first, Jack Kirby is not really a name that many Essendon fans are going to naturally be familiar with, but he's someone that you came across in some research you were doing for another activity, and you would give us a bit of an idea of who Jack Kirby was and why we've chosen him as the name for this medal.
Yeah, some might remember that we did a bit of a countdown to season 2024, and I first came across Jack through that. So he played 77 games for Essendon between 1911 and 1915, and then obviously took a break for World War One and returned in 1918. He kicked 113 goals in those 77 games. He was a small forward, and the little bit of history about Jack is that he's credited as being the first ever VFL/AFL player to kick a goal with their first kick in their career. He was a leading goal kicker in 1912, which was a premiership year. He kicked 43 goals in that season, and then was a leading goal kicker again in 1913, as well as being runner-up in 1914 and third in 1915, which is a little bit ironic given how much we're Essendon in 2024 and beyond are crying out for a quality small forward. It'd be nice if we can find the next Jack Kirby in this year's draft.
Yeah, fingers crossed we do get that. Now, in terms of how the voting structure worked, okay, so both Jono and myself will give our 3, 2, 1 at the end of each game during the First Thoughts episode that we put out on our Patreon. And then our Patreon subscribers also put in their 3, 2, and 1s. Then the Patreon subscribers are tallied and we get an overall 3, 2, 1 from them. And so overall, the maximum a player can receive in a game is 9 votes per game. And so therefore, it's going to be quite high numbers in terms of the results, but it does give quite a wide view of who was the best player in each particular game. We're going to get straight into it with round one, Jono.
Yeah, so we took on the Hawks in round one. It feels like forever ago already, doesn't it? But the season started off in a real positive way. We were able to knock off the Hawks at the G. Our best on the AFL website in that game were Perkins, Stringer, Wright, Mackay in his first game for the club, McGrath and Merritt. Stringer kicked 4 in that game, Langford 3, and Wright, Guelphy and Perkins kicked 2, with Menzies, Caldwell, Gresham in his debut for the game, and Sammy Durham hitting the scoreboard as well.
Yeah, it was a great start to the season. A couple of years in a row now, we've had that win against the Hawks at the MCG. It's always good beating them, especially in an anniversary year for us for the 40 years of the 1984 Premiership. There, onto the votes for that game.
Yeah, so I gave 1 to Jake Stringer in that game, kicked 4 goals, as we mentioned up top. 2 votes I gave to Andy McGrath, and I gave the 3 votes to Archie Perkins, who, yeah, started off the season really, really strongly. And we thought, yeah, here we go for Archie. It didn't quite play out that way. Humie, you gave the 1 to Matt Guelphy, 2 to Ben Mackay in his first game for the club. Good start for him. And the 3 to Perkins as well. And then the aggregated votes across our Patreon subscribers gave 1 to Jake Stringer, 2 to Andy McGrath, and 3 to Archie Perkins.
Yeah, so great start from Archie there in that first game. Then on to round two versus Sydney, where Essendon 15-11, 101, lost to Sydney 19-17, 131. It was a bit closer than that, as I recall, for most of the game. Swan sort of just blew it away towards the end, got some easy goals towards the end that blew out the score, probably a bigger margin than otherwise the game deserved. The AFL had Merritt, Setterfield, Martin, Gresham, Caldwell, and Durham as Essendon's best. And then in terms of goal kickers, Gresham and Stringer kicked 3, Langford, Merritt, and Wright 2, and Cox, Draper, and Goldstein 1. Do you have many remembrances of this particular game, Jono?
Yeah, you're right. I watched this one on the tally because it was up at the SCG, of course, and Stringer kicked a goal at sort of 25-minute mark of the third quarter to put us within, if I remember correctly, 9 or 10 points, certainly within two goals. And the Swans kicked the last two goals of that third quarter and then kicked the first of the third to kind of get it without out of reach. We came back in the last and showed some resolve and some fight, but ultimately the Swans midfield got on top and yeah, once and we saw this throughout the season. Once the Swans mids got on top, they were really hard to pull that momentum back off them. So yeah, the Swans ran out reasonably comfortable winners in the end.
Yeah. So in terms of the votes, Jono, you had one vote to Gresham with his 3 goals, 2 votes to Setterfield in the middle there, and then 3 votes for Zach Merritt. Myself, I had Sam Draper with 1 vote. That was his first game for the year. He missed the first game from memory. Jade Gresham with 2 votes, and then Zach Merritt with 3. And then the combined patron vote was Will Setterfield 1, Jade Gresham 2, and Zach Merritt 3. Let's move on to round 3.
Yeah, so round three, we took on the Saints at Marvel. It was a pretty dour game, as games against Ross Lyon coach teams tend to be. We were able to beat the Saints by 4 points, coming back from 7 points down at three-quarter time. Best players on the AFL website were Nick Martin, Dersma, Parrish, Zach Merritt, and Kyle Langford. Goal kickers, Stringer and Langford kicked 3, Jones kicked 2, Dersma and McGrath kicked 1 each.
Yeah, it was almost a game of two halves. We were really struggling in the first half there to get the ball out of our back half, and then in the second half we managed to turn things around. I think Nick Martin really exemplified that game. It was the game where he got over 40 touches, playing off that half back line, and I do distinctly recall, most of his touches in the first half were sort of deep in the 50, whereas he was getting further up the ground in the second half, where he had less touches than the first half, but got more damaging there, and you got a sense of the momentum shifting in that game from watching that one. On to the votes then.
Yeah, I gave Dyson Heppel the 1 vote. I gave 2 to Andy McGrath, who had a really good start to the season, and 3 votes to Zach Merritt. Humie, you gave the 1 to Xavier Dersma, who kicked his first goal for the club in that game. 2 to Dyson Heppel, and 3 to Andy McGrath. I think Hep's experience was really important in that game. And then our patrons gave 1 to Dyson Heppel, 2 to Zach Merritt, and 3 to Andrew McGrath.
Yeah, and interesting game because obviously Nick Martin had so many possessions. I think we all a bit thought it was a bit stat padding there. Even in the second half, he was a lot more effective there.
Yeah, and Jake Stringer kicked 2 goals, the last 2 goals of the match, didn't he? To effectively win us the game, but didn't feature in the votes either.
Okay, on to round 4 versus Port Adelaide during gather round, and I had the unfortunate. I was unfortunate to be there. It was fun to be at gather round, just not for this particular game where Essendon 6-6-42 lost to Port Adelaide 17-9-111. The AFL lists Gresham, Merritt, Mackay, Dersma, and Caldwell as our best, but best is relative based on that game. It was one of our worst performances of the year, and a game where Port showed just what they can do when they get on top in the middle. In terms of goals, Gresham had another good game with 3, and then Stringer, Perkins, and Jones were other goal kickers that round. You were watching comfortably at home for that one. How long did you last before you switched off on that one?
No, glutton for punishment all the way to the end. But yeah, I'm not sure I was sitting too comfortably watching it, mate. A little bit like the Swans game, albeit the run from the opposition came earlier, didn't it? So we had a lot of territory dominance for the first quarter and first part of the second quarter, but weren't able to put the score on the board. It was 2 points the difference, sort of, I don't know, 6 or 7 minutes into that second quarter. And then again, the midfield of Port Adelaide really did get on top and we fell away pretty badly and Port just dominated the game from there.
Yeah, so on to the votes. A bit harder to make choices when there's so few good performers. You had one for Harry Jones. Harry came back into the side, played the first game, then missed the second, and then he was brought back in late, I think, against the Saints due to a late out, and really started to perform well. And it's probably his best year he's had since that first year he broke into the side. Ben Mackay with 2 obviously had a lot of work to do with the ball, spending so much time in Port Adelaide's forward line. And then Nick Martin with 3. I gave Jade Gresham 1 vote for his 3 goals, Jai Caldwell for 2, and Nick Martin with 3. And the patrons had Zach Merritt with 1, Nick Martin with 2, and Ben Mackay with 3. On to round 5.
Yeah, good to see Ben Mackay getting some votes early in the season. But yeah, round 5, I think we all, as Essendon fans, went into this game not sure what to expect after a bad loss the week before and wondered whether things might really start to fall away. But it was exactly what we wanted to see. We saw a team show plenty of fight and resolve and really stood up. We were able to beat the Dogs by 29 points. And, you know, it could have been and probably should have been more than that. The Dogs kicked the last couple of goals of the game. AFL gave the best to Sam Durham, Zach Merritt, Dersma, Langford, Goldstein, and Caldwell. Cole Langford kicked 3. Jones, Stringer, and Dersma kicked 2 each. Goldstein, Caldwell, Martin, Alwyn Davey Jr., Gresham, and Sam Durham all kicked the single goal.
Yeah, it's probably in the top couple of wins of the year with a bit more of an arm wrestle in the first half. And we really just blew the Dogs off the park, sort of that back end of the third and the start of the fourth. I think from memory, we had dominance in terms of territory in the back of the third, but we couldn't quite put it on the scoreboard. And then at the start of the fourth, we managed to turn it on. It was, you know, if you think about some of the games towards the end of the season when we did have that dominance, we then weren't able to put the score on the board where against the Dogs in this round, we were able to, and that's what got us the win.
Yeah, so into the votes, I gave 1 to Harrison Jones. I gave 2 votes to Sam Durham and 3 to Xavier Dersma. Humi, you went with 1 to Dersma, 2 to Jai Caldwell, and 3 to Sam Durham. If we remember, Durham and Caldwell did the jobs on Libba and Bontempelli in that game. And then our patrons gave 1 to Harrison Jones, 2 to Xavier Dersma, and 3 to Sammy Durham.
Yeah, just on that, we've spoken a lot about this year the rise of both Durham and Caldwell in terms of those midfield roles, and it's probably this game where it really started to stand out just how impactful they could be. And fortunately for us, they kept that going for the majority of the year. On to round 6, where Essendon went back to Adelaide after being there a fortnight before on Gather Round, and Essendon 10-18-78 defeated Adelaide 11-9-75. A bit of controversy at the end there with Sammy Draper and a free kick that probably could have been given, but wasn't. And we eventually got over the line there. AFL had Merritt, Martin, Caldwell, Hobbs, and Gresham as the best, and the goals were Jones and Langford with 2 each, Gresham, Parrish, Hobbs, Stringer, Merritt, and Martin with 1 each. Although, as you can see from the amount of behinds we kicked, we weren't exactly very accurate that night, and probably one of those games where we probably should have won by more, given the dominance that we had.
Yeah, we certainly did dominate a large part of the game. I think X score had us about 11 points behind our expected score. Yeah, as you said, inaccuracy really hurt us. So 62 inside 50s to 43. So yeah, it should have been a game that we won by more than the 3 points that we did.
And onto the votes from that game. So again, Harrison Jones, Mr. Consistent, keeps getting those 1 votes these last few weeks. Nick Martin with 2, and then Zach Merritt with 3. I had Mason Redmond with 1, Zach Merritt with 2, and Jai Caldwell with 3. And then our patrons had Sammy Durham with 1, Zach Merritt with 2, and Jai Caldwell with 3 there.
Yeah, and on to the round 6 leaderboard. So after the 6 games, we had, or the combined votes had a tie in 5th place, Sam Durham and Archie Perkins, both on 9 votes. Archie getting all of those in round 1. A tie for sort of 3rd and 4th place with Nick Martin and Jai Caldwell, both on 10. In 2nd place, Andy McGrath, who started the season really strongly. He was on 13 votes, and no surprise, number 1 at this stage of the year is Zach Merritt on 21 votes, getting quite a lead already.
Yep. On to round 7 with Anzac Day against Collingwood. And as we all know, that was a draw. Both sides scored 12-13, 85. Both sides had good opportunities right at the end there to win the game. Langford with his shot, and then Elliott dropped a mark that he really should have taken to give them a chance to win the game. Real back and forth game there. Essendon got out to really quick lead, and then Collingwood dragged it back. But then Essendon was really good at Essendon and rebounded again and broke Collingwood's momentum when they had caught back up. And were able to, as I said, eke out a draw there at the end there. The AFL website had Merritt, Parish, Langford, Stringer, McGrath, and Martin as the best, whilst the goal kickers were Langford with 4, Wright with 2. Stringer and Jones both kicked 1, but if I recall correctly, they both had 2 or 3 behinds each. Davey, Parish, and Draper also kicked 1 there.
Yeah, you're right, mate. If any game, and we said this during the year, didn't we? If any game deserved a draw, it was probably this one. We kicked the first 4 goals of the game, and then 6 goals to 2 at quarter time. So we did leave the window ajar, but that's what Collingwood do, and they keep challenging sides and did all throughout this season. To get a draw was a pretty fitting result to what was a really combative and enjoyable game of footy.
Yeah. So on to the votes, Jono. You had 1 vote to Dyson Heppel. Game. I think Dyson really stood out in games like this where it was tight. His experience really helped us hold on in a lot of those close games. Obviously, this one was a draw, but there's a lot of examples where it's Dyson did something brave or something intelligent that really slowed the play down and made sure that we didn't throw results away. 2 votes for Zach Merritt, who was the Anzac Day medalist, and you gave 3 votes to Andy McGrath. I had 1 vote to Nick Martin. He was really impactful when he switched forward there. He gave us that impetus at the start of the 4th quarter. 2 votes for Zach Merritt, and then 3 votes for Andy McGrath. And then the patrons had 1 for Jake Stringer, who did a lot of the impact at the start in the centre bounce to really drive that early dominance. 2 votes to Andy McGrath, and then 3 votes to Zach Merritt. I did notice in the Brownlow account that Andy McGrath didn't get anywhere near the votes. I know Zach Merritt won the Anzac Day medal, but I thought McGrath was the most important player on the ground for us and probably the best player overall on that day.
Yeah, I guess the umpires are in a little bit of a difficult situation where they're largely watching the footy, aren't they? And maybe not taking too much notice of what happens off it. It leads me into a question though, mate. When you're putting the votes together after a game, what are you sort of looking for? Are there any particular themes you're after, or does it sort of change a little bit week to week?
It's hard because some games it's really easy to pick out who the best players are. They either stand out really well, or it's a game where we've done really poorly and there's only been 1 or 2 good performers. I'm trying to think it impacts key moments as much as possible. Who's been the most impactful in terms of driving the win forward. Going back to this game, for example, I think it was at the start of the 3rd quarter that we were really struggling and Collingwood was surging. And McGrath cut off probably 3 or 4 Collingwood thrusts into the forward line, and then used the ball really well coming out to help set us up. And obviously, one thing we've struggled with in the past is small forwards, and he really locked down on Bobby Hill that day and prevented him from having much of an impact. So I looked at that. I mean, Zach was a worthy Anzac Day medalist winner, but that's why I had him at the top of that one. How about you? How do you go about your votes?
Yeah, similar. I think with the 3 votes tend to pick themselves, and often the 2 does as well. I think for the ones you can scratch around a little bit more, but when I'm watching a game live, I'm typically watching the sort of set up behind or in front of the footy more than I'm actually watching the footy itself. So with those 1 votes, I tend to look at guys who are performing, roles or positioning themselves to where I think they should be based on the way I think we're trying to play. And that's why you tend to see, in my votes, guys like Heppel and Jones and the likes pop up, because they might not be getting lots of the footy, but they're presenting or taking their opponents to dangerous positions or whatnot. So yeah, whereas if I'm watching a game on telly, obviously you can only go by what's on the broadcast. So it tends to be ball players popping up in my votes a little bit more when we play interstate games or I can't make the match for some reason.
Yeah. All right, on to round 8 versus West Coast, Jono.
Yeah, so over in Perth, we had a game that was a lot tighter than we would have liked. West Coast brought some players back. We ended up winning the game by 6 points, albeit it never looked like we were really going to lose, did we? We led by sort of 3 or 4 goals throughout most of the night. Best players were Merritt, Parish, Martin, Durham, Langford, and Perkins. Zach Merrick, along with Kyle Langford, kicked 3 goals each. Peter Wright kicked 2. Sam Durham, Dersma, and Stringer kicked 1 goal apiece. What do you remember from that one, mate?
Well, I think it's easy to look at West Coast and go, oh, they're a bottom of the ladder side. But I think this was around the time where they were really in form. Reed was playing well. They had Dom Sheed playing really well. I think Jake Waterman was obviously one of the form forwards in the competition. They weren't the West Coast of past years. That said, we probably should have done better. I think it's a symptom of how we've been over these past couple of years that we find it very difficult to put sides like West Coast away, and it's something that contributes to where our percentage is, and that potentially costs us down the line as well. So yeah, it's one of those ones where you got the win and you just moved on, but looking back, it did show signs of some of the issues that we would have going forward.
Yeah, you're right. We were 15 points up at 3/4 time, and it was 3 goals to 1 in that last quarter in West Coast favour. So yeah, we just couldn't get the full job done. But on to the votes, I gave 1 vote to Nick Martin over in his home city, 2 votes to Darcy Parish, and 3 to Zach Merritt. Hume, you gave 1 to Nick Martin as well, 2 votes to Darcy Parish, and 3 to Zach Merritt. We might have copied each other's homework there. And then our patrons gave 1 to Darcy Parish, 2 to Nick Martin, and 3 to Zach Merritt. So same 3 players across the board for all 3 groups.
And on to my favourite game of the season for a few reasons against GWS in round 9. Firstly, it was because when we did the live show, which was a fantastic thing to be involved with the Lunchtime Catch-Up podcast and the flight plan. It was fun to do our segment and meet so many people who listen and our patrons, and then to go to the game itself, and probably our most complete performance of the year in terms. Maybe you could quibble about the start where we let GWS get a bit of a jump on us, but everything probably from about halfway through the first quarter was about as good as we played across the entire year, with Essendon 12-10-82 running out 20-point winners against the Giants 9-8-62. The AFL had Durham, Langford, Martin, Caldwell, Merritt, Redmond, and Mackay as the best, with Kyle Langford kicking 4 goals, Guelphy 3, and then Stringer, Redmond, Perkins, Hind, and Davey kicking 1 each. How did you see this game, Jono?
Yeah, with a lot of excitement, mate, wasn't it? It was a really enjoyable afternoon. The build up for us was really big and lots of fun. And then thankfully for us, our team didn't let us down. And yeah, it was a pretty comprehensive game that didn't have any real highs in terms of statistical markers. We just in every part of the game we were able to beat GWS and beat them by beat them well. And it all culminated in a 20-point victory after being 12 points down at 12 points down at halftime. So it was a day where I walked away going, I'm not sure whether we're really good or we're just okay, but there's something about us that in terms of our resolve and our commitment that seems to have improved from where we're at last year. And I felt like that was a pretty good foundation to build upon.
So, and onto the votes, Jono. You had Mason Redmond with 1 vote, Matt Guelphy with 2, not only as a goal kicker, but also locking down. I think it was on Lockie Whitfield. He did a really good job. And that's one of the things that the Guelphy did well when he was able to play this year. Obviously had some injury issues, but locking down on the best rebounder from the opposition and hitting the scoreboard as well. It was one of his best years in terms of his in-game performance. As I said, injury probably cost him a high position in our votes this year, and Nick Martin with 3 votes. I had Kyle Langford with 1 vote for his 4 goals, Matt Guelphy with 2, and then Sam Durham with 3. And then the patrons had Sammy Durham with 1, Kyle Langford with 2, and Matt Guelphy with 3.
Yeah, on to round 10 against North. Probably a comfortable win in the end. We sort of toyed with them a little bit, didn't we? Allowed them to be closer for the most part than they should have been, but then pulled away towards the end, and we won the game by 40 points. AFL gave the best players to Zach Merritt, Nick Martin, Jai Caldwell, Matt Guelphy, and Archie Perkins. Peter Wright kicked 4 that game, played a fair bit of time in the ruck as well. Guelphy kicked the 3, and that was the the game where he was it that game or the game before? Sorry, now I might have mixed them up. Where Guelphy painted his nails in tribute to the young girl in hospital. But yeah, a moment that's certainly worthy of mentioning. Stringer kick two, Sardis, Jones, Davy Jr., Gresham, Perkins, Langford, and Zach Merritt also kicked a goal each.
Yeah, it's always good to keep that streak going against North Melbourne. And I know their Fire fans are getting really frustrated with how much we uh, keep getting one over them. It's not going to last forever, but as long as it keeps going, I'm going to enjoy it.
Yeah, rightly so. And on to the votes. Nick Martin with the one vote for me, Peter Wright with the two, and then three votes I gave to Jai Caldwell. You, Humie, gave one to Peter Wright, two to Andy McGrath, and three to Caldwell. And our patrons gave one to Guelphy, two votes to Peter Wright, and the three votes to Jai Caldwell as well.
Okay, on to round 11 versus Richmond. Dreamtime at the G, and Essendon won their second Dreamtime game in a row, defeating Richmond by 12 points. The AFL had Ridley, Stringer, Merritt, Langford, and Laverty as the best, with Stringer kicking four, Langford three, Hind two, Owen Davey, Ridley, and Merritt all kicking one each. It was the Jordan Ridley return show, and it was an outstanding performance from him on his return from the injury that he suffered in the preseason. What are the other memories that you have from this game, Jono?
Yeah, the two that stand out, and it certainly wasn't to do with the quality of the game because it wasn't the greatest football spectacle. But of course, it was game number 200 for Jake Stringer, and he put on a bit of a show, kicking those four goals and hitting the scoreboard from some pretty difficult shots at times. And then of course, it was game number one for Nate Caddy, who had not without trying, had a few pings at the goal, but wasn't able to get his first career goal in that game.
Yeah, well, that did come later. I'm sure we'll talk about that when we do get to that. And I'm not sure there's going to be many surprises in who the three votes are from this one, but we'll go through it. Jono, you had Mason Redmond with one vote, Nick Hind with two, and then Jordan Ridley with three. I had Laverty with one, Hind with two, and Ridley with three. And then the patrons had Redmond with one, Hind with two, and Ridley with three. As you can tell by the votes, the game really dominated from our back half, where our back half provided so much in terms of limiting Richmond's ability to attack and then propelling us forward there. Moving on to round 12.
Yeah, this game was up at the Gold Coast. Our first crack against the Suns with Damien Hardwick as their coach. It was a game where again we had a lot of territory dominance and really should have won the match. 11 goals, 14 to 14-7 was largely tells the tale of the tape. Best according to the AFL website was Merritt, Martin, Hind, Ridley, Heppel, and Redmond. Nick Cox got forward and kicked three goals in this game. Peter Wright, who did some really good things in the ruck as well as pushing down back. That was a game, of course, when Nick Bryan was our number one ruckman. Menzies kicked one on a wing. Kelly, Jones, Hind, Guelphy, Durham, and Caldwell were our other goal kickers. What do you remember from this one, mate?
I remember I was watching it with a few of our patrons at a bar, and we couldn't hear the commentary, which made it a much better viewing experience. Yeah, it was one of those frustrating games where we probably should have done better than we did, and it was our first loss for quite a while. And it was probably a warning of what potentially was going to come in the second half of the year with us having such dominance across the ground and not being able to put it effectively on the scoreboard, and that costing us the win at the end of the day.
Yeah, certainly was. Onto the votes. I gave one vote to Zach Merritt. I gave two to Dyson Heppel and three to Nick Hind. You gave one to Zach, two to Dyson Heppel, and three to Nick Hind. Again, we copied each other's homework. And then our Patreons went one Dyson Heppel, two to Zach Merritt, and three to Nick Hind. It was a bit of a purple patch for Nick, wasn't it? He was playing some really good footy at that stage and then found himself out of the side not too long after.
Yeah, it was one of those ones where he got forced to the sub position because of players coming back, and then as we've seen, if you get forced to the sub position, it's really hard to keep your form, and then you find yourself out of the side. And unfortunately for Nick, out of the club as well, which was a bit of a surprise given where he was at mid year. On to round 13 against the Blues. And uh, similar to the previous week, although the margin was a lot greater, Essendon couldn't take advantage of their territory, kicking 9 goals 16-70 to Carlton's 15-6-96. The AFL site had Martin, Merritt, Durham, Ridley, and Caldwell as the best. The goal kickers were Guelphy and Martin with 2 each, Cox, Gresham, Durham, Jones, and Stringer with 1 apiece. What are your memories of this game, Jono?
Yeah, I remember watching this at about 11 o'clock in the morning from the hotel bar in London. I was overseas at the time, so didn't get to the game. But remember being really frustrated that we weren't able to get rewards for our hard work. It was 60 inside 50s to about 48 in that game. And look, generally as a rule, if you get 41 it was, sorry, I just looked it up. So yeah, 19 more inside 50s. But generally, yeah, if you get 60, you'd be pretty confident of winning the game. But we only had 84 marks to 99, and as we've said throughout the season, if Essendon gets 100 marks, we generally win the game. So despite getting that territory dominance, we just weren't able to shift the ball around and get into more dangerous spots and be able to put the score onto the board.
Yeah. On to the votes. Jono, you had Jordan Ridley with 1. I believe it was a game where he really played closely on Charlie Curnow, and it was one of his better games where he is playing that role closely. He was able to nullify Charlie for the most of the extent, particularly after quarter time, and then also was able to uh, do the intercept role pretty well. It's not something he's always was able to do for his remainder of games of the season. Jai Caldwell with 2 votes, and then Nick Martin with 3. I had Jai Menzies with 1 vote. I think it was the game where he moved sort of to the wing and the halfback. And one thing that really stood out to me for Jai this year, I know he didn't have the best year and he certainly didn't kick as many goals as did the year before. But one thing that stood out, and I think part of the reason he got a contract was he worked really hard to get into space and be that option, which a lot of our players weren't doing it. And that's part of the reason why we were breaking down in the back half of the year. 2 votes to Nick Martin, and then 3 votes to Caldwell. The patrons had 1 to Sammy Durham, 2 to Jai Caldwell, and 3 to Nick Martin.
Yeah, so onto the leaderboard. Nick Hind got himself up to fifth spot on the leaderboard at this stage with 15 votes. In fourth place was Andy McGrath, who's starting to drop down a little bit. He was on 23 votes. Jai Caldwell's moving up the board at this stage. He's on 26 votes. Second place, Nick Martin, who's making a late charge on 27. And of course, Zach Merritt stays in first position on 41 votes.
First game after the bye, so we had bye round 14, and then West Coast at Marvel, the return game. And Essendon, again, they won by 30 points, 19,822 to West Coast 13,1492. The AFL best was Durham, Merritt, Stringer, Mackay, Caldwell, and Martin. And goal kickers, Stringer kicked 5. Caddy for his first goal was quite a good one as well, as I recall. Langford, Wright, and Guelphy kicked 2. All 4 of those. And Caldwell, Durham, Dersma, Heppel, Merritt, and Hind kicked 1. How do you, other than Caddy's fantastic first goal, Jono, do you recall much else about this game?
Yeah, it's the left foot banana, wasn't it? Not the conventional way we thought he might have got it, but no, it wasn't a pretty game to watch by any stretch. We were sort of sloppy coming off the bye and got the 6 points, but that was all that I really took away from it. I think it was just good to get the win and sort of move on.
Yeah. Onto the votes. Jono, you had Jake Stringer with 1 because he's for his 5 goals. Jaden Laverty with 2, and then Jai Caldwell with 3. Triple J there from you. I had Zach Merritt with 1, Stringer with 2, and then Sammy Durham with 3. And then patrons had Stringer with 1, Caldwell with 2, and Durham with 3.
Yeah, on to round 16. Had the Cats at the MCG. Game we lost by 45 points. Best on ground, the AFL website was Jai Caldwell, Sam Durham, Zach Merritt, Nick Martin, and Matt Guelphy. Goal kickers Stringer and Peter Wright kicked 2. Gresham, Merritt, Hind, Guelphy, and Langford with 1 goal apiece. How did you see this one, mate?
It's a bit unfortunate because I think this is a series of 3 games we sort of went into thinking we've got a really good chance here. I think it was a bit unfortunate that the two games we lose in this streak ended up being a bit wet. That's not to say that we shouldn't be better at playing in the wet, but it didn't help us there. And obviously, I think the standout for the Geelong game is some of the bizarre umpiring decisions that happened in that third quarter that really sapped us of any opportunity to gain momentum. And we let it slip there, which again is disappointing that we weren't able to bounce back at the start of the fourth. That we just sort of let the game slip away. But for a time there, we were probably on top for the most of that first half. Again, in a similar vein to a lot of other games where we had that territory dominance, but we couldn't put it on the scoreboard. And then when Geelong turned the ball over off us, they were able to be a lot more effective.
Yeah, they certainly were. And then they combined that with some midfield dominance and yeah, got some decisions go their way and they were able to run away with it. But onto the votes. I gave 1 to Peter Wright. I gave 2 to Nick Martin and 3 to Jai Caldwell. Humie, you had 1 to Peter Wright as well, 2 to Harrison Jones and 3 with Jai Caldwell. And our patrons voted 1 with Sam Durham, 2 votes to Harrison Jones and 3 to Jai Caldwell.
On to round 17 versus the Pies, and Essendon managed to make up for the Anzac Day draw by getting the win 13-14-92, defeating Collingwood's 12-8-80. And it was a typical Collingwood game where they did try to come back at the end, but similar to the GWS game, we really professional the way that we held on to the lead in that game. It ended up being closer than it probably deserved to be based on how much we played well across the first 3 and a bit quarters. The AFL had Merritt, Caldwell, Draper, Durham, Shield, and Mackay as Essendon's best. And then for the goal kickers, big spread in this one. Langford and Wright both kicked 2. And then Caddy, Caldwell, Draper, Dersma, Gresham, Guelphy, Jones, Merritt, and Stringer each kicked 1. How did you see this game, Jono?
Yeah, your comparison with the GWS game was a sound one. Even the Bulldogs game, we kicked, what was it, 4 goals, the last 4 goals of the third quarter, or the only 4 goals actually of the third quarter, and then kicked the first 2 goals of the last to get 5 goals up. And then, the Pies got the last 3 goals of the game just to challenge us a little bit at the end there. But it never felt like it was a game that we were going to lose. And it was good to get one up against the arch rivals, and it did feel like we'd maybe buried some of the demons from prior years. Having had that bad loss to the Cats the week before to then come out and win against a good team, I thought was a really important step.
Yeah. On to the votes, and Jono, you had Sam Draper with 1, Jai Caldwell with 2, and then Zach Merritt with 3. I had Sam Durham with 1, Jai Caldwell with 2, and Zach Merritt with 3. And then the patrons had Dylan Shield with 1, Jai Caldwell with 2, and Zach Merritt with 3. So 9 votes there to Zach Merritt.
Yeah, onto round 18. So this is that other game you mentioned that was played in the wet. We lost to the D's. The AFL gave the best to Jordan Ridley, Nick Martin, Zach Merritt, Ben Mackay, and Dylan Shield. Nick Martin kicked 4 goals in that game. Langford and Dersma 2, Durham and Jones 1 each. What were your memories from this one, mate?
Just being incredibly frustrated with how difficult we found to move the ball. We probably gave up some easy goals in that second and third quarter that kept Melbourne close enough or in the lead, and then they just had that burst at the start of the last quarter. We did try and come back, and for a time there, with the way Nick Martin was going, we thought that we were somewhat of a chance, but again, a really disappointing game where for the most part we had that dominance and we let it slip away.
Yeah, you're right. We did give up some really soft goals in that one. And didn't finish off our own hard work, which is frustrating. But onto the votes, I gave 1 to Dylan Shield. I gave 2 to Ben Mackay and 3 to Nick Martin. Humie, you went 1 to Dylan Shield as well, 2 to Ben Mackay as well, and 3 to Nick Martin. And then Patreons, 1 to Jai Caldwell, 2 to Ben Mackay, and 3 to Nick Martin.
And the leaderboard after 18 rounds, 5th place is Sammy Durham with 22 votes. 4th place, Andrew McGar, 23 votes. Didn't get any votes in that period, but is still in 4th place. Nick Martin with 38 votes. Jai Caldwell making a big run in this block, moves to 2nd with 47 votes. Just 4 votes behind Zach Merritt in 1st place there. So still a couple of players who can potentially win it in this last session there. Who is going to win it? You'll have to stay along and find out as we move on to round 19 against Adelaide.
Yeah, so return game, this one at Marvel, a game that we ended up losing by 2 points in a high scoring affair, both teams scoring over 100 points. Best for us was Redmond, Merritt, Durham, Langford, Mackay, and Cox. Cox kicked 3 goals in that game. Jones, Caddy, Langford, and Gresham 2, whilst Durham, Stringer, Draper, Caldwell, Merritt, and Redmond all kicked 1 goal apiece. Apart from pulling some hair out, mate, what were your takeaways from this one?
Oh, this was the back and forth game where we, the second quarter we let them kick, was it 7 or 8 goals in a row, and it felt really bad. It felt, I think you think of some of the worst performances Essendon's put in over the past few years. I was thinking back to, I think, the Bulldogs game in 2019 where they just steamrolled us. I was getting those vibes at that time, and we did so well to get back in the lead. And then given how we've been going across the season with our ability to hold on to leads, we saw it against the Bulldogs, we saw it against the Giants, we saw it against the Pies a couple of weeks before. I thought we would be mature enough to be able to hold on to it, and unfortunately, law of averages suggests that you can't always win the close ones, and we unfortunately gave this one up. And even at the end from that centre bounce, Zach Merritt makes a different decision coming out of the centre bounce. Maybe we still do end up winning this game, but game of inches, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. The Crows kicked that first goal of the second quarter. We kicked the next two, and then the Crows piled on 8 in a row. And yeah, we kicked 2 to close out the half, just to, I guess, pull us close and kick the first 4-5 of the third quarter. And yeah, as you said, Crows then went on to kick the last 3 goals of the game and ultimately run out the winners. But yeah, let's get on to the votes. I gave 1 vote to Nick Martin. I gave 2 to Sam Durham and 3 to Zach Merritt. Humie, you gave 1 to Nick Cox. You gave 2 to Kyle Langford and 3 to Sam Durham. And our patrons gave 1 to Nick Cox, 2 to Zach Merritt, and 3 votes to Sammy Durham.
And round 20 versus St Kilda. I know I talked about the Port Adelaide game as being a pretty bad game to be at. I think this was probably worse given that it was at Marvel and we really did not fire a shot. And it wasn't against a side that played in the prelim like Port Adelaide. It was a side that finished just below us in St Kilda. So it was really disappointing. I think you and I and a couple of friends were sitting together for this one. And yeah, we weren't very complimentary about some of the efforts we were seeing this game, that Essendon lost 55 to 108. The AFL website had Merritt, Dersma, Durham, and Caldwell as Essendon's best, although I'd put best in quotation marks given the way the players performed in that game. The goal kickers were Shield with 2, and then Draper, Durham, Dersma, Jones, Merritt, and Stringer each kicked 1. Less said about this game, the better, I would have thought, Jono.
Yeah, let's get straight into the votes, mate. This was by far the most disappointing performance of 2024. So yeah, let's get straight into the votes.
Yeah. So Jono, you had Draper with 1, Dersma with 2. I think this was the game that he got re-injured and we lost him for the rest of the year, I think, at this point, which is frustrating because when he was on the field this year, he was fantastic for us and probably one of our best recruits off the last year. And you had Zach Merritt with 3. I had Merritt with 1, Jones with 2, and then Dersma with 3. And then the patrons had Jones with 1, Dersma with 2, and Merritt with 3.
Yeah, well, good job getting through that, mate. But we move on to round 21 against Fremantle. And look, not everything went our way this year, and ultimately we didn't finish the season we would have liked to. Whilst I don't think any of us had aspirations of being in the position that Brisbane find themselves in at the moment. We thought and hoped and expected that given our position, we may well have finished our season stronger than we did. But one of the things that I did take away from this year is that when we did put in a shocking performance, and really I think we had 2 really bad performances, Port Adelaide and St Kilda, we did bounce back and play well the following week. And this was against a team that at that stage was challenging for a top 4 position in Fremantle. We were able to win the game thanks to a semi-Durham behind right at the end. The AFL gave the best players to Zach Merritt, Jai Caldwell, Stringer, Parrish, Redmond, Shield, and Martin. Stringer kicked 4 in this game. Gresham 3. Martin and Langford kicked 2. Draper and Caddy kicked 1 apiece. What do you take away from this one, mate?
As it probably doesn't look as good as it did at the time. As you say, Fremantle we're looking like a top 4 side, and I think a lot of people were talking up their premiership chances. They ultimately finish outside the top 8. So in hindsight, it's not as good a win when you look at it like that. It was it was a game where I was close to giving up on it. Pretty. It was, if Fremantle had kicked one more goal in that last quarter, I think we were toast. But we got the momentum, and I think it was the midfield there, Dylan Shield. I know a lot of people have written him off earlier in the year, but he showed just what a class player he is, and he really drove a lot of that momentum in that last bit where we really got onto it. And again, it's one of those things with modern AFL. Once you have momentum, it's really hard for opposition teams to stop, and so yeah, we were able to get the win there, and it was really pleasing to be there for and experience that moment. It was one of my favourite moments of the year when Sammy Durham kicks that behind, and you have a look at the AFL app and you see there's only a certain amount of seconds, and then Sam Draper takes that big mark in the middle of the field, and you know you're going to win. It was a really great moment there.
Yeah, and we set up the same way we did for that last centre bounce against the Crows, didn't we? But in that one, Zach Merritt missed his kick in this game. He gave the handball to Sam Durham, and he was able to kick it behind and give us a 1 point victory. But onto the votes, I gave 1 to Dylan Shield, who you touched on, really showed his leadership, and he's still got some good footy to play. I gave 2 votes to Jake Stringer, and I gave 3 to Darcy Parish. Humie, you gave 1 to Dylan Shield as well, 2 votes to Jai Caldwell, and 3 to Jake Stringer. And our patrons gave 1 to Darcy Parish, 2 votes to Jake Stringer, and the 3 votes to Jai Caldwell.
On to round 22 against the Suns, another close loss, and in this case, an after the siren. Whilst I'm getting a bit over these after the siren losses, it'd be nice to inflict one for once rather than being on the end there. Essendon 12-14, 86 lost to Gold Coast 13-9, 87. It was something, was it like 1-9 in that last quarter? If you generate that many shots and goal in the last quarter, I think 99 times out of 100, you win the game from the position that we were in. And unfortunately, we were on that 1 out of 100 one where we just could not get the ball through the big sticks. The AFL website had Merritt, Martin, Redmond, Draper, and Caddy as the best. And then the goals were Draper and Caddy both kicking 3. And then Menzies, Stringer, Jones, Caldwell, Durham, and Roberts with 1 apiece.
Yeah, it just felt inevitable towards the end then, didn't it, that we were going to let this one slip, unfortunately. And yeah, Mac Andrews took a really good mark and had the poise to finish. It was another game where we dominated territory, 62 inside 50s to 51. Outranked Gold Coast for intercepts as well. Clearance work was pretty sound. We took over 100 marks, so we did most things right. We just weren't able to close the game out, weren't able to make the most of our opportunities going forward, and ultimately Gold Coast were 1 point victors.
Onto the votes for this one, Jono. You had Darcy Parish with 1, Nick Martin with 2, and then Zach Merritt with 3. I had Nate Caddy with 1 vote for his 3 goals. Nick Martin with 2, and then Zach Merritt with 3. And then the patrons had Darcy Parish with 1, Nick Martin with 2, and Zach Merritt with 3. The penultimate game of the year, Jono, against the Swans.
Yeah, so our last home game for the season, we ended up, just sort of drifting away in this one. A bit of a similar story against, sort of the better teams where we were competitive for a half or so, and then the game got away from us. The AFL gave the best players to Martin, Laverde, Draper, Caldwell, and Roberts. Nick Martin kicked 3 in this game and really tried to put the opposition, put his teammates on his shoulders and take the game up to the opposition. Draper, Stringer, Jones, Caldwell, and Langford kicked 1. What do you remember from this one, mate?
Just even when we were dominating in the first half, I just had this feeling that the Swans, with their quality and the way that they play, and the way that we've been playing and giving, after a period of time where we haven't been able to score, giving the opposition opportunities, that it was bound to end up the way that it did. It basically felt inevitable that this was sort of going to be the result of the way the game was playing out in the first half, and unfortunately for us, that's how it happened.
Yeah, the Swans were sort of kicking them from everywhere in this game, weren't they? And just before halftime, Jake Stringer missed that real easy one in front of goal, and it felt sort of symbolic of what Essendon in 2024 had been like. Onto the votes, though, I gave one to Sam Draper, I gave two to Darcy Parish, and three to Nick Martin. Humie, you gave one to Dylan Shield, two votes to Archie Roberts for, I think, his first vote. So I think that's the first time he's popped up, and three votes to Nick Martin. And our patrons gave one to Dylan Shield, two votes to Jai Caldwell, and three votes to Nick Martin.
And on to our final game of the year against the eventual premiers. I'm not sure we all thought that this was going to be the eventual premiers when we played them, but they obviously had a fantastic final series. I know people have thoughts about Joe and Connor, but I was really happy to see them get the results. And also don't like Sydney, so I was happy that someone beat Sydney. We went up to Brisbane and lost 67 to 87, although Brisbane probably should have won by more. They had 32 scoring shots to 17. AFL had Merritt, McGrath, Heppel, Langford, Roberts, and Martin as the best for Essendon, and then goals Langford kicked 3 and Stringer 2, which gave Langford a 1-goal win in the Essendon goal kicking. Merritt, Martin, Hobbs, Gresham, and Draper all kicking 1. Obviously, a really sad in some ways with Heppel retiring. Is that the main thing you took out of this game, or anything else that sticks with you from this result?
Yeah, I think so, mate. That was the main one. It was an emotional finish. I think the other thing I liked, and I know Brisbane, largely put the cue in the rack, and the game was over, and there was no benefit to gain from them from really showing any fight in the last quarter, because percentage didn't really mean anything to them. But to at least sort of stick with it, we kicked 5 goals to none in the last quarter. So I was pleased that at least we were able to walk off with our head held high to an extent, and we didn't let the game, aided by Brisbane's inaccuracy, we didn't let this turn into a complete and utter thumping. So yeah, they were my main memories of it, mate.
Yeah. And the final votes for the year, Jono, you had Dyson Heppel with 1, Nick Martin with 2, and Zach Merritt with 3. I had Zach Merritt with 1, Andy McGrath with 2, and then Dyson Heppel with 3. And the patrons had Nick Martin with 1, Dyson Heppel with 2, and Zach Merritt with 3. I think really pleasing to see Dyson Heppel there in his last game get the recognition from both of us and the patrons there for his performance and a fantastic career as an Essendon great that he is.
Yeah, well said, mate.
Yeah. So that takes us to the final results. And in 5th place, we have Andy McGrath with 25 votes. I think 23 of those votes came in the first half of the season. He didn't stand out as much in the second half of the year.
Yeah, and then in 4th place, and I expect we'll see him in the top 5 of the Crichton medal as well for the first time, was Sam Durham on 30 votes, who had a really consistent season, as you'd expect, a young player in his first year in the midfield. He did, from week to week, struggle for a little bit of consistency, but his good footy this year was really good, and I think we'll see him play even more good games next year.
And in 3rd place, his partner in crime in the midfield, in Jai Caldwell, had finished the year with 54 votes. Real big step up from Jai. Sort of moved into that first rotation midfielder after sort of being in the periphery, sort of that second, third rotation and half forward. He's really cemented himself as one of those key movers in that midfield.
Yeah, and in 2nd place, I think one of our other prime movers who I hope we get to see next to Durham and Caldwell on a more regular basis next year, and that's Nick Martin on 57 votes. I think he had a stellar season, added some more strings to his bow, and he's really starting to mature as a bit of a leader of our footy club as well. I look forward to seeing what Nick can do after another big preseason in 2025.
And to no one's shock, the winner of the inaugural Jack Kirby medal is the Essendon captain, Zach Merritt, with 79 votes. I'm sure he's a raging favourite to win a Crichton, which will be his fourth or fifth Essendon
Yeah,
Best and Fairest.
fifth, I think, mate.
Fifth makes put him in some pretty rare air in terms of Essendon greats there. I'm sure he's going to hold up the Kirby medal right there with the Crichton medal as well as quite an honour there. But yeah, so congratulations to Zach. Congratulations to all of the people who placed there and everyone who got votes there.
Yeah, if Zach does win the Crichton, and we expect he will, he's equal at the moment with Tim Watson and Simon Madden on 4. A fifth Crichton would place him level with James Hird, and then only Dick Reynolds and Bill Hutchison on 7 ahead of him. So, of course, each of those guys had some tremendous team success throughout their careers. Zach hasn't been able to achieve that yet, but in terms of his individual influence and input on our footy club, yeah, he sits comfortably alongside those names, and yeah, he's taken his game to another level since he's become a captain, a worthy winner of the Jack Kirby medal, and let's hope he gets to add some team based medals to his his CV before his career is over.
Yeah. Well, that'll wrap up the inaugural Jack Kirby medal. You can see the leaderboard there, the top 5 votes getters. Just want to say thank you, everyone, for your support of Don the Stat this year. Thank you for getting through this video. Jono, any final words from you?
Thanks to you, mate, for everything that you've done for Don the Stad and the community over the course of 2024. Yeah, it's been lots of fun doing this with you. It's been lots of fun to meet lots of people for the first time, and people we've met before, and share many special moments throughout the year. So whilst we didn't get the wins that we all would have liked, and haven't quite had that final success just yet, the people you meet along the way certainly makes this very rewarding. So yeah, thank you to yourself, Humi, and to everyone else who's played a role.
Yeah, and of course, thank you to you for all you do, Jono. You put together this presentation, made it look a lot better than what my original thing was going to look like, and then obviously all your insights and everything you bring is so valuable to what we do here at Donderstat. Donderstat wouldn't exist without you. Let's just say that. Yeah, and then just thank you for bringing me along with this. But that'll do us for this evening. Stay safe, everyone, and go Dons.